Chapter 9 Rosie's Bar. Rosie's Bar is a smoke-filled dump around the corner from Monty's Go-Go, both establishments known for sticky floors, cheap booze, and constant trouble, and both are notorious biker hangouts. This was a seedy part of town full of warehouses, abandoned buildings, drug addicts, and degenerates. The city in general is corrupt and broken, and this neighborhood is left to operate by its own rules and survive off its own commerce, both legal and otherwise. Pug walked past the bikers in front of Rosie's, and none of them took any notice. He walked in the front entrance, took a few steps, stopped, and scanned the room for Jimmy. The first thing he noticed was the haze of smoke hovering over the pool table. The whole place smelled of weed, piss, and body odor. The blaring noise coming from the loudspeakers resembled some tribal anthem from a society of crazed maniacs. No one took any notice. Pug took a few more steps along the front wall and scanned the room until he spotted Jimmy talking with a few bikers at the pool table. He stopped and waited for Jimmy to notice him. Pug stood out like a sore thumb with his classic slick-back haircut and designer shirt, and even that didn't make anyone take notice of him. He stood alone, as if among a single-minded collective to which he posed no threat and possessed no attribute they wished to acquire. Jimmy looked around the biker he was talking to and noticed Pug. He stared at Pug for a second, then went back to talking. When he took a minute from his conversation with the biker at the pool table, he looked back at Pug and pointed him over to the far end of the bar where no one was sitting. Pug nodded back and went over to the far end of the bar and took a stool. Jimmy finished his conversation at the pool table, then disappeared into a crowd of bikers looking for Pop. The girl behind the bar was blonde and had a rough face. She was wearing a cut-off tank top, square-toed work boots, and tight shorts frayed at the ends and belted with a red bandana. She wasn't old, but years of booze and bars gave her a weathered look that was part of her outfit, and she wore it well. The girl locked eyes on Pug, walked down the bar to him and asked, "Well, you have?" After staring at her, Pug replied, "Bottle of beer. Whatever you got is fine." The girl replied, "Bottle of beer." She turned and walked to the beer locker. She pulled out a bottle of cheap beer, walked back, and locked eyes with Pug. She put the bottle in her mouth and opened it with her teeth. She clunked down the bottle of beer. She took the money Pug had on the bar, went away, made change at the cash register, and returned to Pug and placed the money on the bar. Pug pushed a few bucks towards her, and she took the money and smiled. Pug smiled back. The girl turned away from Pug and walked down the bar, responding to someone yelling, "Katie, beer!" Pug looked at his beer and thought about where he was and what he was doing there. Louis was right. This place smelled like an ass beating. The reality of a situation becomes a little more clear sitting at the lonely end of a bar filled with a bunch of animals who would probably not think twice about beating the piss out of you for no reason at all. Jimmy found Pop sitting at a table with a few of the heavies that he recruited from church the night before. Jimmy walked over to him, bent down, and spoke into his ear. "Pop," Jimmy said, "the guinea's here." Pop said to Jimmy, "Where?" Jimmy nodded his head in Pug's direction. "Over at the end of the bar." Pop leaned over to see around Jimmy. He stared at Pug sitting at the end of the bar. He sized him up, then looked back at Jimmy and said, "All right, let him sit there a minute. Pull up a chair." The heavies at the table continued to talk amongst themselves. Pop listened a while to the conversation. Then he leaned to the side again to look at Pug one more time before he turned to Jimmy and asked, "Does he have anything with him? I don't see a bag or nothing." Jimmy replied, "I didn't see him carrying anything when he walked in, but through the crowd, I could have missed something." Pop leaned over to take another look and said, "All right, let's hang tight." Pop turned in his chair and leaned back. He tapped on the shoulder of a short, stocky biker sitting behind him. That biker's name was Pint. He got the name Pint because he looked like a pint carton of milk, short and square. Pint had a weird-shaped head. His lip curved up on the right side, and his left eye was lower than his right eye. He had a flat, square-shaped nose like a boxer who took a lifetime of beatings. His bald head had a bunch of old, faded tattoos, including one of a swastika. The legend was that Pint was born at a biker party in Cali. He was pulled out of his mother by some stoned out of their mind old ladies, and when his drunk-ass father got to him, His head was all out of whack. His father pushed and squeezed until he had the general shape of a head and stated to his mother, "Good enough." Then he handed the baby back to the old ladies and went back to the party. And that was that. Pint was also known to be short-tempered and violent with anyone who thought they might have the upper hand due to him only being a slightly taller than a midget. He got a reputation of being direct and to the point. Don't fuck with me. And he made his point, often with the help of a ball-peen hammer. Pint leaned in his chair on its back two legs, which left only the tips of his boots on the ground. He looked straight ahead while Pop spoke in his ear. It was a clandestine conversation, consisting of Pop speaking and Pint listening, staring straight ahead and nodding in agreement. When all the details of the conversation were finished, both men pulled their chairs forward and returned their attention to their respective tables. Pop went back to listening to the heavies at his table. The conversation having gone nowhere, he didn't miss anything. After a few minutes, Pint finished his beer, got up, and went out the front door. Katie walked back over to Pug, locked her eyes on his eyes, and asked, "Need anything?" Pug replied, "No, I'm good here, thanks." Katie started to say something before someone yelled, "Katie, another bottle of piss!" Katie smirked at Pug and then turned and headed for the beer locker. Pug picked up his beer and leaned himself up on both elbows and stared behind the bar, thinking it might be a bad idea to make any eye contact with any of the bikers. He spent his time following Katie around the bar with his eyes, and when she went up to any of the bikers, he returned his eyes to his beer. It only took Pint 5 or 10 minutes to come back into the bar. He walked back to his chair and turned it around to face Pop. Pop asked, "So what we got?" Pint, "Yeah, there's a guinea in the Wapmobile across the street. Yeah, must be with the one at the bar." Pop, "Okay." Pint, "He's sitting in the car. He's fixing his hair. No shit." Pop, "He better have the fucking bag. I was hoping for some easy work tonight." Pint, "What do you want me to do?" Pop turned to Jimmy. "Jimmy, come here. Lean in here." Jimmy pulled his chair in with Pint and Pop started. "Your buddy's got a friend outside." Pop moved his eyes around the bar, then back to Jimmy. "You and me. We're going to talk to that kid at the bar. If he doesn't have the load, I'm guessing the greaseball in the car outside has it." Pop turned to Pint. "Pint, you go get ready outside. Keep an eye on things and take a couple of heavies." Pop then spoke to both Jimmy and Pint. "Me and Jimmy will talk to this kid here. If he's got the load, we'll take it. If he pisses about wanting to see the money," Pop looked around the room, then brought his attention back to Pint and Jimmy. "I'm going to have you, Jimmy, take him to Monty's. Take him out the back door, here, and over to Monty's. Keep him occupied at Monty's. Give us time to work on the kid in the car. Keep him there until I send a runner down to tell you what to do, okay?" Jimmy said, "Got it." Pint followed with, "Got it, Pop." Pop finished with, "If that load isn't with that prick in the car, we got a long night ahead of us." Pop stood up, and so did Jimmy and Pint. Pint headed for the front door. On the way, he stopped and spoke with a couple of heavies. The heavies nodded in agreement to whatever Pint said to him. Pint finally headed out the door. Jimmy followed Pop over to the pool table. After a few minutes, one of the heavies Pint talked to, he went out the front door, and a couple minutes after that, the other heavy went out the door. Pop filtered into a group of bikers and had a couple short conversations. Jimmy followed. After Pop was done talking, he turned to see that Jimmy was with him. Then he made his way over to Pug. Katie was making her way down the bar to Pug, and she had her eyes locked on him, and Pug had his eyes locked on her. She got to Pug and was about to say something when she turned and walked away. Pug sat up straight and looked for an answer to what just happened. Then he felt a tap on his shoulder. Pug turned around and standing there were Jimmy and Pop. Jimmy made the introduction. "Pug, this here's a friend of mine. He's the one I told you about." Pug nodded at Pop. Pop looked Pug straight in the eyes, then looked him up and down. Pop got right to the point. "Okay, so where's the bag?" Pug looked at Jimmy, then back at Pop. "Where's the cash?" Pop, "So you want me to bring you the cash when you ain't got no bag? You came in this place without no bag. I thought you were coming here to do a deal. That's not how this game is played, kid." Pug, "Look, I got it. I just got to see the cash. Pop looked at Pug and said, I thought the setup was you bring the shit with you. What the fuck happened? Pop looked at Jimmy and shrugged his shoulders. Jimmy turned to Pug and said, Hey man, that was what we talked about last night. What's up? Pug looked at Jimmy and replied, The plan changed. Pop looked at Jimmy and again shrugged his shoulders. He returned his attention to Pug and shrugged his shoulders. The plan changed? What the fuck you mean the plan changed? There was a long pause with no one talking. Pop and Jimmy stared at Pug as if it was Pug's turn to talk. Pug looked at Pop. I need to see the money. Then I go get the bag, and it's the bag for the money. Pop looked at Jimmy and then at Pug. Where's the bag? You come here with no bag. I pull out some money and you got no bag. How do you think I see that? Pug looked around the room. He saw Katie dealing beers to the bikers. He turned back to Pop. I got the bag right outside. Pop said to Jimmy, I thought he was supposed to come alone. Then Pop turned to Pug. You got a kid nearby? Who's outside? Pug said to Pop, right outside. I see the cash, I go get the bag, then we go right back to the plan. Pop stared at Pug and spoke to Jimmy. Check this prick. Jimmy turned to Pug and said, Pug, I gotta check you. Pug thought about it and thought that no real guy from a crew would let a dirty biker check him. Pug said, Fuck that. How about I check you? Right then, Pug felt a bump from behind. He turned his head, and a heavy was right behind him. This biker was about a foot taller than Pug and as wide as a buffalo. Pop said, We weren't asking. Jimmy put his hand on Pug's chest and ran it around under his arm. Pug stood there staring at Katie with a smirk on his face until Jimmy was through. Jimmy looked at Pop and signaled that Pug was clean. Pug said nothing. Any tough guy script Pug had in his head was gone. He realized that real tough guys wouldn't be in this position, and that was the difference between a guy in a crew and a kid. Pop stared at Pug, and Pug kept his eyes on Katie as she dished out bottles of piss to the animals. He could feel the heavy behind him. He could feel the air blow on the back of his head when the monster breathed, and it smelled like weed and piss. Pop stared at Pug, and Pug stared at Katie. Pop said to Jimmy, Okay, Jimmy, take him around the corner to the cash. Pug took his eyes off Katie and turned to Pop. Why don't you just bring the cash here? Why don't you just shut your fucking mouth, kid? You'll go with Jimmy and you'll see what you're looking for. Pug turned and looked at Katie for a while. He decided to go with Jimmy. Maybe that would smooth things over. Pop said, You want to see the fucking money? Go with him. That's the best deal you're going to get. And you better be for real, kid. I ain't fucking with you. Again, there was a long pause without anyone talking. Pug got off the bar stool. He turned to Jimmy and said, All right, let's go see the cash. Pop said, Go see your fucking money, kid. Jimmy led Pug out the back door of Rosie's. When Pug and Jimmy were out, Pop headed for the front door.